They'd said goodnight the same way for months. It had become part of the rhythm between them, so familiar that neither of them remembered when it started. The same route, the same slow walk, the same pause outside her building that lasted just long enough to feel intentional, but not long enough to be questioned. Until tonight. They walk side by side under the soft glow of streetlights, the city quieter than it had been earlier. Dinner had been easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that doesn't need momentum because it already has history behind it. They've been friends first. Solidly. Intentionally. The kind of friendship built on showing up without expectation. She slows as they reach her building, keys already in her hand. He notices immediately, not because she's late, but because she always does this. Always draws out the last few steps like neither of them is ready to let the night end. Well, she says softly, stopping at the door. Thanks for walking me. Of course, he replies. Anytime. They stand there, close but not touching. The familiar space between them hums quietly, like it always does. She unlocks the door. This is usually where it ends. She steps inside. He waits. They say goodnight. He turns and leaves. Except tonight she doesn't step back. She opens the door and stays where she is, half turned toward him, one hand still on the handle. He notices immediately. The silence stretches, not awkward but heavy with awareness. You okay? He asks gently. Yes, she says. I just realized something. He waits. She looks at him now, really looks. Not searching. Deciding. We've been doing this for months, she says. You walking me home. Standing right here. Saying the same goodbye. Yes, he agrees. And I don't think it's accidental anymore, she adds. His breath shifts slightly but his voice stays calm. I don't either. The honesty settles between them like something solid. She hesitates, then steps back just enough to open the door wider. Do you want to come in? She asks. The question isn't rushed. It isn't casual. It's careful. He doesn't answer immediately. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he understands what she's asking. Not just about tonight, but about the months that led here. Yes, he says finally. If you're sure. She nods once. I am. He steps inside. The door closes behind them with a soft click that feels louder than it should. Her apartment is quiet, warmly lit. Familiar in a way that makes the moment feel grounded rather than dramatic. He's been here before, but never like this. Never this late. Never with the awareness that staying changes something. She sets her keys down slowly, as if giving herself time to breathe. Do you want some water? She asks. Sure, he says. She moves into the kitchen, and he follows at a respectful distance. The air between them feels charged, not urgent but present. She hands him a glass. Their fingers brush. This time, neither of them pretends it's nothing. They let go at the same moment. They move into the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch at first. Muscle memory guiding them into familiar positions. For a few minutes they talk about neutral things. About work. About a show she's been watching. About nothing at all. But the space between them feels louder now. She shifts, tucking one leg beneath her. The movement brings her knee closer to his thigh. She notices. He notices. She doesn't move it away. You're quiet, she says after a moment. So are you, he replies. She smiles faintly. I'm trying to decide if I'm overthinking. You usually don't, he says. She glances at him. No. No, he says. You tend to trust your instincts. That lands. She leans back slightly, her shoulder brushing his arm. This time there's no apology. His arm tenses briefly then relaxes, staying exactly where it is. I don't want this to feel sudden, she says quietly. It doesn't, he answers. It feels overdue. She exhales softly. They sit like that for a while, the quiet deepening rather than thinning. She becomes aware of how close they are now, how little space remains between them without either of them having consciously closed it. She sets her glass down on the table. He does the same. A small synchronized choice. She turns toward him more fully now, her body angling in his direction. Her knee presses lightly against his thigh. This okay? She asks. Yes, he says immediately. Tell me if it stops being okay. She nods. They're close enough now that she can feel the warmth from his body, steady and grounding. She rests her hand on the cushion between them, fingers relaxed. After a moment, his hand mirrors the movement, settling nearby. Not touching. Close enough that the space feels intentional. This is different, she murmurs. Yes, he agrees. But it doesn't feel confusing. No, she says. It feels clear. She leans in slightly, resting her head against his shoulder. The contact is gentle, but it carries weight. He adjusts instinctively, his arms sliding behind her shoulders to support her without pulling her closer. She smiles softly, eyes closing for just a second. I'm glad you stayed, she says. So am I, he replies. They don't kiss. They don't rush. They sit there, sharing warmth, letting the reality of the moment settle in. This isn't about impulse. It's about choice. After a while, she straightens slightly, though she doesn't pull away completely. I don't want tonight to change how safe this feels, she says. It won't, he replies. If anything, it feels more honest now. She nods satisfied. The clock on the wall ticks quietly, reminding them that time is still moving even if they aren't. Do you want to stay a little longer? She asks. Yes, he says without hesitation. They shift closer, naturally this time. Her side presses against his chest. His arm wraps around her more securely, hand resting at her upper arm. The closeness feels settled, chosen. Outside, the city hums faintly. Inside, nothing feels rushed. They'd said goodnight the same way for months. Tonight is just the first time neither of them pretended that goodbye was all it was. They don't notice the time passing at first. It slips by quietly, measured only by the occasional shift on the couch or the way the room seems to soften around them. The lamp casts a warm circle of light that doesn't quite reach the corners, and outside the window the city hums at a distance, steady and unconcerned. She's still leaning against him, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. His arm remains around her, relaxed but intentional, as if it has found a place it recognizes. This is different, she says again, more to herself than to him. Yes, he replies. But it doesn't feel wrong. No, she agrees. It feels like we stopped pretending. That earns a quiet smile from him. They've both spent months pretending. Pretending the walks were just practical. That the pauses at her door were just politeness. That the way their conversations lingered meant nothing more than friendship. Sitting here now, none of that feels necessary. She shifts slightly, turning her body a little more toward him. The movement brings her knee fully against his thigh, the contact no longer subtle. He doesn't tense. He doesn't pull away. Instead, his hand adjusts at her upper arm, thumb resting lightly there, grounding rather than guiding. Is this still okay? He asks quietly. Yes, she says immediately. More than okay. She lifts her head just enough to look at him. Their faces are close now. Close enough that she can see the softness in his expression. The care there. Not hunger. Not urgency. Attention. I don't want to rush this, she says. I know, he replies. We won't. They sit like that for a moment longer. Eyes meeting, breath shared. The closeness settling into something steady rather than volatile. Then she does something small but unmistakable. She reaches for his hand. Not quickly. Not nervously. She simply takes it, her fingers threading lightly through his, resting them together on the couch between them. The contact feels natural, like something they've been circling for months. His fingers curl around hers in response, gentle but certain. That feels right, she murmurs. Yes, he agrees. The silence that follows is comfortable, filled with awareness rather than uncertainty. She leans in again, resting her forehead briefly against his shoulder before lifting her face toward his. This time, when she pauses, it's close enough that there's no mistaking what she's asking. He doesn't rush. He leans in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, and when their lips meet, it's soft and unhurried. A kiss that feels less like ignition and more like confirmation. His hand remains steady around hers. Her free hand rests lightly against his chest. They part just as gently, foreheads touching for a moment afterward. She exhales softly. That was long overdue, he suggests. She smiles. Yes. They don't kiss again right away. They don't need to. The first one has already done what it needed to do. Acknowledge what's been there all along. She settles back against him, this time more fully, her side pressed comfortably into his chest. His arm tightens slightly, holding her with quiet assurance. This doesn't feel complicated anymore, she says. It isn't, he replies. We made it complicated by not naming it. She nods, tracing a small, absent-minded circle on the back of his hand with her thumb. I was afraid, she admits, that if we crossed this line we'd lose the ease we had. And now? He asks. And now, she says, it feels like we gained honesty instead. He smiles faintly. That's what it feels like to me too. They talk then about the months that led here, about moments they both noticed but never mentioned. The night it rained and they stood under the awning too long. The times they both lingered after saying goodbye, waiting for something neither of them had been ready to ask for. It's strange, she says, how something can be so obvious in hindsight. Maybe it had to take time, he replies, so it wouldn't feel like a mistake. She looks up at him. This doesn't feel like one. No, he agrees. It feels intentional. Eventually, the hour grows later than either of them expected. She glances at the clock and sighs softly. I should probably let you go, she says, though there's no urgency in her voice. Only if you want to, he replies. She considers that, then nods. I want tonight to end cleanly. He understands what she means. They stand slowly, disentangling without haste. The closeness lingers even as they create a bit of space between them. At the door they pause again, just like they have so many times before. But this time the pause feels different. Not uncertain. Not restrained. Just aware. I'm glad you stayed, she says. So am I, he replies. And I'm glad, she adds, that we didn't pretend this was nothing. He smiles. I don't think either of us could anymore. She steps forward and kisses him once more, brief, warm, deliberate. When they pull apart, she rests her forehead against his for a moment, eyes closed. Next time, she says softly, we won't need the walk as an excuse. He chuckles quietly. Next time I'll stay because I'm invited. She smiles. You are. He leaves a few minutes later, walking down the hallway with a sense of calm certainty. Nothing about tonight feels rushed or confusing. It feels like a natural progression. One that's been waiting patiently to be acknowledged. Inside, she closes the door and leans against it for a moment, smiling to herself. They'd said goodnight the same way for months. Tonight was simply the first time they didn't say it as a goodbye.